Hello, everyone. How are we doing this afternoon? I'm going to start with a question, and not this question, but another one. Have you ever stayed quiet because you were afraid of someone? A parent, a teacher? Have you ever felt unsafe in a safe space? Or scared in a brave space? That is what I'm here to talk about today. How, when we talk about space building, we talk about interpersonal relationships, we often don't look at the thing that is at the very core of it, which is comfort, emotional comfort. Now, in these situations that I just asked you about, whose emotional comfort do you think was being centered? Yours, or the person whose reaction you were afraid of? The other person. Now, quite often, the other person is a person who has influence, who has more power, and the person who is afraid of speaking up has an idea, has a challenge, has a tweak, has a change to offer. And that is not being offered because of being terrified of what comes after you speak. This is called psychological safety. Now, I'm going to give you a little definition. Psychological safety is the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. In layman's terms, if you make a mistake, are you going to try to hide it? Or are you going to own up and try to fix what has happened and take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again? Are you going to offer developments, changes, improvements if it's not working? It's not clear? Okay. Is this clear, everyone? Okay. All right. So psychological safety is the idea that you feel safe in expressing mistakes, ideas, offering change. If you're afraid of offering these things, then change is not occurring. The status quo is remaining as it is. And quite often, the reason why this happens is because the people who have influence, the decision makers, are the people whose comfort is being centered. Now, what happens when psychological safety is actually centered? When the person who has influence, who is making the decisions, takes a step back and says, you know what, this is actually quite hard for me to hear, because it either challenges my authority, it challenges a system that I have created, it challenges a system that I benefit from, and takes a step back and says, you know what, let's look at this. Let's look at what is being offered, even when it is uncomfortable for me. This means, in a university, for example, new ideas flourish. You can go up to your professor and say, you know what, I know this is how this idea has progressed over the last so long, but I have another idea that challenges this. And the professor takes a step back and says, you know what, I think you're wrong, but I'm going to listen anyway. I think this makes me upset, but I'm going to listen anyway. And through that dialogue, through looking at what is actually happening, when we center the comfort of the people who are challenging you, that is when change occurs. That is when progress occurs. In an office setting, this means there's innovation. This means there is improved profits. It also means there is increased diversity. It means things like there are more women who participate in the workforce, because quite quite often people like managers who are quite often men will be open to listening when women say this is an obstacle for us to partake in the workforce, to being promoted, to even being hired. Now, whose emotional comfort are you centering right now? It's mine, right? Because I'm here, standing here, nervous, shaking, confused, checking my notes. But you're listening, even when it's uncomfortable. Now, what does this question actually do? What is it especially challenges the universality of our own experiences. A lot of the time we think how we think or how we act or how we do things is how everyone else thinks, everyone else acts, or everyone else does things. And particularly people who are influential, people who are decision makers, people who are in positions of power, will not be aware of other people doing things, thinking things, believing things, having alternate ideas. And it is only when people like that take a step back and say, I'm going to listen, even when it's uncomfortable, that things like that evolve. Now, who are the stakeholders in any given situation? There's the person who's bringing the idea, there's the decision maker, and there's the person who has to implement. This is, of course, an oversimplification, but just to give you an idea. All of them will have a stake in implementing something, and all of them need to feel like they can be heard. People don't speak until they feel safe enough to speak, until they feel like there will not be negative consequences for speaking up. So what do? We take perspective. We look at how it impacts each stakeholder. Every stakeholder comes up and says, this is how it impacts me. Other people sit back and say, you know what? This impacts me differently, but I'm going to sit in discomfort and listen. In my own practice as a therapist, I use something called Privileged Informed Emotional Support, PICE for short. And in summary, when you look at the person who has more privilege, that is the person whose emotions you have to decenter in order for these discussions and these ideas to flourish. Now, how do we do this? We've talked about active listening. Now, active listening means actually trying to understand what the other person is saying instead of just absorbing information passively. It's not like watching television. It's like, let me clarify. Is this what you mean? Is this what you don't mean? I'm not sure I understand the difference between what you're saying before and something else. So asking those questions, validating the emotions of the person who is speaking, who has been historically scared, marginalized, diminished, saying, you know what, I know this is terrifying for you. I know the last 5 times you said something, someone either screamed at you, someone either told you you were XYZ. I'm here. I'm going to sit in my discomfort and still give you an opportunity. And the most important one, and this is where we often get stuck, is the person of privilege experiences shame. Because having something that is so fundamental to what you already believe, how you do things, your ideas, being challenged, brings up uncertainty that you haven't experienced before, and your own abilities and systems and structures that you have gotten used to. And that is what leads to these reactions. So monitoring shame is perhaps the most important thing when it comes to someone who is in a position of influence and a position of power. And there's various ways we can do that. And the role of communication and open dialogue in fostering psychological safety is essential in this. I just want to briefly talk about some common objections before I conclude. A lot of people say that it's time-consuming to give everyone space, to give everyone time, but it is worth the investment. Allowing people or offering people the space and emotional comfort to speak, to share, to be vulnerable is an investment that is worth doing in any organization, in any interpersonal relationship. A lot of people in an organizational setting will say it's not their responsibility. It's the responsibility of HR. It's the responsibility of management. It's the responsibility of someone else. But psychological safety is something that is organization-wide. It's intrapersonal. It happens from the bottom up. At every level of staff, at every department, in every relationship. Some people will say it's too risky. But embracing discomfort is essential for growth. Otherwise, you will stagnate. You will continue to do things how you've always done, while other organizations that provide psychological safety will flourish. Let me give you an example. I'm autistic. I can't speak without looking at my notes. I have atypical mannerisms that people might not be very used to. But you're all sitting here and listening to me right now. So if you can do it right now and sit with the discomfort of observing mannerisms that perhaps might seem a little odd, a little strange, a little unusual, but you're still taking in what I'm saying, that means you know how to do this, and you can in other situations too. Thank you very much.